Elsewhere in Jerusalem, we can speak to Yaakov Katz. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, now a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Thank you for joining us today. How hopeful are you that this ceasefire will actually be agreed, but also, crucially, whether it's going to hold?
Well, I think hold is the big question, because even if the ceasefire is reached, as we saw in November of 2023, when the first hostages were released, then about 100, Hamas then reneged on the deal and it fell apart. The fighting resumed and the rest of the hostages have remained ever since then inside the Gaza Strip. So while we can all hope, and it does seem that there is optimism, as was just said, the addition of Donald Trump's special envoy, Witkoff, who's also been involved in these talks, the major declarations and threats that Donald Trump himself has made, that there would be hell to break loose, there would be a price to pay for Hamas. Of course, the Biden administration's continued efforts here, and Israel now showing a little more flexibility on some of the issues, as well as Hamas, of course, has enabled a possible deal. But even if those 33 hostages, which are being spoken about in the first batch, are released, that still leaves over 60 inside Gaza and in Hamas captivity, and this will not end until they all are returned.
We heard from my colleague Amir there about the pressure that there is on Hamas from the incoming Trump administration. But how much domestic pressure is upon Benjamin Netanyahu from those who want a ceasefire and those who don't want a ceasefire?
Well, most of the country definitely wants a deal. That's not a question. All surveys show that, and you see it in the polling, you see it in the general sentiment here in Israel on the street. But there is also a strong faction, and especially within Netanyahu's own government, two of the political parties that make up his coalition have already declared that they will vote against the deal once it is brought to the cabinet. That might be something that happens as early as today or tomorrow. It's unclear if they will then topple the government or they'll just symbolically vote against the deal. He will still have the votes of the other ministers of the government to get it approved. But that definitely shows that this is something that is still divisive. The reason being that this will cause and force Israel to have to release over 1,000 Palestinian terrorists and prisoners that it has in its jails. And it will also, more importantly, lead to an end to the war, which is what at least these political parties and their followers want to see continue until Hamas is finished. And as we've seen just the last few days, 9 Israeli soldiers killed in Gaza. The fighting there does continue.
Okay, Yaakov Katz from the Jewish People Policy Institute. Thank you for joining us with your